What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again, discussing the latest episode of Y: The Last Man. We're breaking down episode 5, which was titled Mann Hunt, an episode in which we see Agent 355 and Yorick come across Dr. Mann, but they have another mission at hand. We're breaking it all down here in the spoiler review, but before we dive into it, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you're new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. If you enjoyed this spoiler review, well, make sure to like and share the review. It helps out the channel a lot, but also appreciate the support. And in the comments below, let's talk about this 5th episode. What were some things you really enjoyed as far as the narrative, these new characters we meet? What were some things that didn't work for you all? What do you hope to see in the weeks ahead? And let's just have a discussion about Dr. Mann and Yorick and 355 lying all the damn time, but also with the Oliver character coming back to the mix. What's going to be this war between the president and who's going to be the new president? Let's talk about it in the comments below. So initial thoughts before I break it down. This episode was okay. It was a little dry at points for me. The world building isn't as wide in scope and scale and as ambitious as I thought the show was going to be based on all the stuff I've heard from the graphic novel. It's more designed to focus on the politics side of it all, which, you know, is pretty much part of course when you have this apocalyptic type of thing happen. But I was just hoping that it would dive more into different groups of women that want to fight the good fight, different groups of women who thrive in this kind of chaotic nature. But we really haven't dove into that aspect so far. And even when we spend those more character beats in regards to characteristics and quieter moments, they just seem to be a bit off, especially the comedy in this episode. When we get Yorick and Dr. Mann, they're essentially the same character to me, which doesn't play well in my opinion, but we'll get into it. But again, overall, I wasn't too impressed with it. It does set the stage, obviously, for the stuff between Oliver and Jennifer. Obviously, we're going to get the journey to San Francisco and all the different stuff, but it was just a little, it was missing interest. It wasn't all that entertaining. It was some clunky fight scenes, and again, I'm a little lukewarm on this episode, but let me know your thoughts. But let's break it all down as we open the episode with Yorick and 355 as they finally made their way to Boston, which we can see is heavily armored with soldiers. You know, they have this lock and key approach where they have a curfew, and oh yeah, they're not the biggest fans of President Brown. They have liar. They think it's propaganda. They think that the government set all this up. So obviously, it's not a good idea for Yorick to let people know if he comes across people who his mother is. But speaking of 355, she gets some intel in regards to Mann's whereabouts, because obviously that's the mission at hand. And of course, we come to expect this with Yorick. He doesn't listen to her. He makes his way into this kind of hideout spot where he comes across these protesters who seem to be very friendly. The young lady that he has interaction with sees that he's a man, and he goes, and I don't know if this is in the comics and graphic novel, the whole like he's transitioning, he's a transgender. Did they use that in the comics at all? Because that's twice now that he's used it. I don't know why he doesn't just use that every time he comes across a civilian or like a random person, like, hey, I'm transitioning, I'm not a real man. But maybe that's something that even if someone came across him, they would probably maybe still kill him. I don't know. But either way, she thinks that he's transitioning, and she offers him to go to a place of like safety and what have you. But during this time, I don't know if we'll ever come up with those characters again. But either way, 355 comes back, and they have to make their way out because the soldiers are going to be doing this tear gas to take away the protesters. So again, weird moment in regards to just that setup. It just didn't really, again, I don't know if those characters, those protesters were pivotal to the story, if it's just a plot device to kind of show us that Boston is in a different stance and they have these protesters that aren't fans of President Brown, or if they're pivotal characters. We'll see what comes of that. But speaking of President Brown, we didn't get her last week, but we catch up with her this week as her and her team are preparing for Oliver's return, Secretary Oliver, and they're gonna welcome her with open arms. They're gonna ask her to join into their team to have like the senior position, obviously not the president position, but a senior position, and hopefully that satisfies her, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But back to 355 and Yorick as they make their way to Mann's headquarters or her house, and they kind of see that she might not be your stereotypical kind of conservative doctor slash scientist. She seems to be a little bit immature, which we'll talk about her characteristics when we get to the interaction between those two characters. But they finally come across her. She attacks Yorick, which is, expectable, and is in this conversation. Number one, she's happy that she sees that there's two males. There's obviously Yorick, and then there's his monkey. And, the thing is, unfortunately, there's a change of plans. Her 15 years worth of research. Her lab has been destroyed, so she wants to go to San Francisco to locate a lab that will have all the stuff that she would need to test on Yorick. And we'll talk about the research here in regards to all those years, 15 years worth of research being destroyed. And she mentions that in San Francisco, she can use some cloning type of research, some cloning type of ways of kind of maybe bringing back mankind and getting the world back, or what I think as a conversation a little bit later, the reproductive system. I think that they're going to want to have him, reproduce and have children, and for they can continue on civilization. But it's within this moment here in the episode in which I personally felt that Yorick and Dr. Mann are two of the same characters. So when they're having their banter, it just felt like they were looking in a mirror, and it wasn't that much of a dynamic between the two characters. Like when we have 355 going up against Yorick in regards to just conversation, their banter, how they're two different types of people, it brings more entertainment. It brings a little bit more diversity. It brings a little bit more of a topic at hand in regards to two polar opposite characters trying to make it to Boston, trying to figure out the cure. It makes the dynamic more interesting versus when you have Mann, who's literally immature, jokey, and like I said, very much in a Yorick vein. It just doesn't fit well for me as far as like the dynamic of those two characters. Let me know how you all felt, if they felt too familiar in your opinion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But meantime, we see 355, she breaks the phone, which I don't know why she's stalling, but I guess it goes into her next mission, this little secret mission that he has at hand. But we'll get back to her in a second, because we do get a really quick scene, but an important scene, as President Brown learns that the helicopters that she sent out one of them has blown up. Now, she's under the assumption that maybe Yorick has died, but she has to keep her composure. I thought that was a really interesting scene, because she has to, again, keep it. She doesn't want people to know that she's found her son. So that was a quick scene, but something that's pivotal to that character, because she's maybe under the impression that her son that she put out there and risked his life is now gone, which obviously she still wants to find her daughter, which we didn't get any of Hero in this episode. But for the very first time, we see that Kimberly character, who I'm not a fan of at all. She has a little bit of compassion towards the the Christine character who's going through pregnancy. She takes her to the doctor. She thinks he's having a miscarriage, but no, she's actually having a child. And they don't mention the sex of the child, which can be key. They're assuming it's a girl, because obviously we know that every male on Earth died with the Y chromosome, but that would be something crazy if she's having a son, because that's obviously going to set the stage. I can see, just watching so many of these shows, that might be like a season 1 finale where they find the sex of the baby and it's a boy, and they end on that, or in that storyline and going into a new season. But it'll be really interesting to see that. But again, Kimberly, this is the first time she's shown some type of compassion towards anyone, because she seems to be the stickler of the group and kind of the villain, the Karen of a sorts of this group. But meantime, we get this really poorly choreographed fight between Agent 355, and then we meet another agent that's very similar to her by the name of 252, and they're looking for this Fran character, who seems to be the main character who recruits these women, kind of like the Black Widow program, and trains them. But there's some animosity and some hate towards that Fran character, because it seems like she took these young girls out of their comfort. I don't know if there were men on the squad that they had, but she took these people out of the comfort of their own homes, or in this case, foster care, to train them to be these assassins. And that kind of brings us to 525. She wants to kill Fran, and we get a little bit of backstory of her after they get that clunky fight out of the way, but she wants to kill her for ruining her life. So Fran's, I guess, another character that we can look forward to meeting if she is still alive. But let me know how you all felt about that fight. To me, it was like really kind of clumsy and just not the best choreographed fight, in my personal opinion. But again, going back to Mann and Yorick having this conversation, she mentions that she's gay, and she asks about 355 going on these secret missions that he doesn't tell her about. And again, we see those similar characteristics, and their back and forth just didn't really work for me. I didn't find any chemistry between those two. I didn't find their jokes to be funny at all about the dicks being drawn on the president's face. I'm just not a fan of those two sharing the screen. Like, I need at least 355 to be in the room with them, so she can at least balance off their similarities and the characteristics there. But going back to President Brown, who is now questioning 355 and her position. Did she kill those other pilots? Who did I leave my son with? Which I'm thinking, like, shouldn't you have done this? She wants to now search of who 355 really is and learn more about that secret operative group. But I'm like, President Brown, shouldn't you have done that before you gave her your son's safety and put his life in her hands? I thought that was a little bit weird, but she has bigger fish to fry at the moment because we now get the official return of Secretary Oliver, and the head games begin as we see Kim makes her way to try to sway her on her side before Jennifer gets her chance, and then we see Jennifer and Oliver having a conversation, this tit for tat of who's going to be in control. We didn't get the official I'm going to come for the presidency, but they're planting the seeds that they're going to come at heads and they're going to have to pick sides, Democrats versus Republicans, which again, the politics in the show is a little bit too heavy-handed for me right now. But going back to the conversation of Yorick and Dr. Mann, she mentions that there were actually women that died that didn't even know they had the Y chromosome, and there's infinite variations of not necessarily, it's not black and white men and women. There's a little bit of grayness within that Y chromosome with learning that women have died, which brings us to the conversation. I think, in the future, Yorick might be someone that, if women know that this is a man out there in reproductive systems, because this is another conversation they have, I wonder will women try to kidnap him to have kids and force him to have kids and whatnot. That'll be really something interesting to see in the future. But wrapping up the episode, we end with 355, who's continuing to lie. She says that she spoke to President Brown, which we know she didn't do that, and that she's authorized them to go to San Francisco. And we see that she has this blinking device in her bag, and I wasn't too sure what that was at first, but I'm thinking maybe that's just implying that she's going to go on a hunt for this Fran character, either to save her from 525 or to get answers of what do we do now, or again maybe she'll kill her. But we'll see what comes of that as they make their way. They're all the way in Boston, they gotta go to San Francisco, so I don't know if that's going to be a season type of thing where we're going to see them on the way, or is that a season 2 type of climax where they finally make it to San Francisco. But I do hope that on their journey to San Francisco, there's more action, there's more groups, there's more conflict, there's more world building, because so far it seems so confined to just these little vignettes, these little areas they drop off, and not as world building. Again, it's a season 1, and again, I know there's 6-7 years worth of comics, but right now these first 5 episodes have been a little bit inconsistent in holding my interest. But I'm hoping things gear up, things pick up, things get a little bit more interesting. But this episode wasn't all that great for me. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know yours, your pros, your cons, your thoughts, your theories, what worked, what didn't work, and what you hope to see in the weeks ahead. Let's talk about it in the comments. If you stuck around to this point in the video, I appreciate you. Make sure before you leave to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and of course subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you all for watching the review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next one.